What if I told you that every single person you meet is basically an open book, and you already have the ability to read them, without them ever knowing? Sounds impossible, right? But it's not. Most people go through life blind, believing what others say. They trust the words, the smiles, the handshakes, the little gestures that seem friendly. But here's the truth: people lie. People hide things. And those who know how to read them, they move faster, smarter, and safer through life. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And here's what most people don't realize. When you master your mind, you start seeing others clearly. Imagine this. You walk into a meeting, a date, a family dinner, and instantly, you know who's pretending, who's insecure, who secretly respects you, and who doesn't. No one tells you, but you just see it. That's power. That's clarity. Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that includes how we misjudge people. We trust too quickly. We ignore the signs right in front of us. But the moment you start observing instead of reacting, everything changes. Because people can control their words, but they can't fully control their actions, their micro-reactions, their subtle behaviors. And once you learn to notice them, you're no longer being manipulated, misled, or distracted. You're in control. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." And that right there is the secret most people ignore. Now listen carefully. By the end of this video, you're going to learn 8 powerful ways to read people without them ever knowing. But you need all 8 points to be truly smart. Miss one, and you miss the full picture. So if you're serious about mastering yourself, understanding people, and never being deceived again, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I see clearly. And stay with me till the end. Because the last point? That's the one that changes everything. Now, let's dive in. 1. Watch what they over-explain. Let me show you something most people never notice. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. When a person is telling the truth, they don't feel the need to convince you. They answer the question. And they stop. Clean. Direct. Effortless. But when someone is hiding something, when something doesn't fully add up, they don't just answer. They perform. They begin to build a story around the answer. They add layers you never asked for. They start filling in gaps that didn't even exist. And if you're not paying attention, you'll think, wow, they're being detailed. But what's really happening is this. They're trying to control your perception. Because deep down, they don't trust that the truth alone is enough. So they decorate it. They stretch it. They protect it. Watch closely. When someone says, "I was late because of traffic," that's simple. That's normal. But when it becomes, "I was late because there was traffic, and then my phone died, and then I couldn't find my charger, and then I had to stop somewhere, and you know how crazy the roads are these days," that's no longer an answer. That's a construction. And constructions are built when something needs to be hidden. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple. Truth doesn't need reinforcement. It stands on its own. But lies? Lies need support beams. They need emotional appeal. They need extra detail. They need your belief. Now here's where it gets powerful. People who over-explain are not always lying. Sometimes, they're insecure. They fear being misunderstood. They fear being judged. They fear not being believed. So they try to over-deliver information, thinking it makes them safer. But in reality, it exposes them. Because calm people don't rush. Secure people don't overprove. Honest people don't overbuild. They speak, and they allow silence to do the rest. Seneca said, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." And that applies here too. Because when someone is telling the truth, There's no urgency. No rush to convince you. No pressure in their voice. Just clarity. But when someone is hiding something, there's tension. They speak faster. They add more. They try harder. And effort is the signal. Here's another layer most people miss. Watch for repetition. When someone repeats the same point, in slightly different ways, they're not emphasizing. They're reinforcing. They're trying to make it stick in your mind. Why? Because they're not sure you believe it. And that uncertainty comes from within them. Epictetus said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." People who are aligned internally don't need to convince externally. They are steady. But people who are misaligned overcompensate. Now listen carefully. Your job is not to interrupt them. Your job is not to accuse them. Your job is to observe. Let them talk. Let them build. Let them expand. Let them reveal. Because the more they speak, the more patterns you'll see. And once you start noticing this, you'll realize something powerful. The truth is usually found in what was said first. Everything that comes after is often adjustment, correction, protection, or distraction. So next time you're in a conversation, don't just listen to what is being said. Watch how it's being said. Watch the length. Watch the effort. Watch the need to convince. Because in that moment, you're no longer just hearing words. You're reading the person. 2. Study their reaction to silence. Now let me give you something even more powerful, something almost no one uses, but it changes everything. Silence. Most people are afraid of it. They think silence is awkward. They think silence is uncomfortable. They think silence makes them look weak. So they rush to fill it. They talk, even when they have nothing to say. But here's the truth. Silence is not empty. Silence is revealing. The moment you stop talking, you shift the pressure. Now the other person feels it. Now they have to respond. Now they have to fill the space. And that's when things get interesting. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." But most people do the opposite. They speak to impress. They speak to prove. They speak to control perception. And in doing so, they hide nothing. Let me show you how this works. You ask a simple question. Then you stop. You don't jump in. You don't help them. You don't rescue the conversation. You just wait. That silence? It creates pressure. And pressure reveals truth. Watch what happens next. Some people will start talking faster. Some will begin to ramble. Some will reveal more than they planned. Because silence makes them uncomfortable. And discomfort exposes the real self. Marcus Aurelius said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." When you are calm in silence, you become powerful. Because you are not reacting. You are observing. And while you remain still, the other person starts to move. They adjust their tone. They change their story. They reveal emotion. All because you said nothing. Now here's where it gets deeper. There are different types of reactions to silence. And each one tells you something. If someone rushes to fill the silence, they're uncomfortable with stillness. That often signals insecurity. If someone becomes defensive, they feel exposed. That signals something to protect. If someone stays calm, measured, composed, that signals control. And control is rare. Seneca said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary, suffers more than is necessary." People who can handle silence are often fighting internal noise. They need constant interaction to avoid facing themselves. But you stay quiet. You stay grounded. You let the moment stretch. And in that stretch, truth begins to surface. Here's a powerful technique. Ask a question. Get an answer. Then pause, and maintain eye contact. Don't react immediately. Don't nod too quickly. Just hold the space. That extra second forces them to keep going. And when they keep going, they go beyond the script, beyond the prepared answer, into the real. Epictetus said, "Be silent for the most part, or speak merely what is necessary. Because the less you speak, the more others reveal." Now understand this clearly. Silence is not about intimidation. It's not about making people uncomfortable on purpose. It's about creating space for truth to appear. And once you master this, you'll notice something incredible. You don't need to chase information anymore. People give it to you. Freely. Naturally. Unknowingly. All because you were disciplined enough to stay quiet. So next time you're in a conversation, resist the urge to fill the gap. Let the silence sit. Let it breathe. Let it work. Because in that quiet moment, you're not just listening anymore. You're seeing. 3. Notice who tries to control the frame. There's a silent battle happening in every conversation, and most people don't even realize it. It's not about who talks the most. It's not about who sounds the smartest. It's about who controls the frame. The frame is simple. It's how the interaction is perceived. It's who sets the tone. Who leads the direction. Who defines what matters. And once you start seeing it, you'll never unsee it again. Because some people don't just talk. They steer. They interrupt your flow. They redirect your point. They subtly shift attention back to themselves. Not loudly. Not aggressively. But consistently. And consistency is the clue. Because true confidence doesn't need control. True confidence allows space. But people who feel uncertain inside, they try to dominate outside. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And people who are not free internally seek control externally. Watch for this pattern. You're speaking, and they cut in. Not to understand, but to redirect. You share an idea, and they twist it, so they can take ownership of the spotlight. You express something personal, and they quickly relate it back to themselves. This is not connection. This is control. Because controlling the frame means controlling how you are seen. And people who rely on that are managing perception instead of living truth. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Real strength is quiet. It doesn't need to interrupt. It doesn't need to dominate. It doesn't need to win every interaction. But insecurity? Insecurity is loud in subtle ways. It shows up as constant interruptions, one-upping stories, turning every topic back to themselves, correcting small things just to feel superior. And if you're not aware, you'll think, they're just confident. But what you're really seeing is dependency on control. Now here's where your awareness becomes power. Don't fight for the frame. Observe who needs it. Because the one who needs control the most is the one who has the least of it internally. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And people who constantly control conversations are often controlled by something deeper. Ego, fear, insecurity. Now pay attention to something deeper. Frame control also shows up in subtle dominance. Not just in words, but in tone, posture, timing. They speak over you slightly. They dismiss your point quickly. They minimize what you say, without directly disagreeing. Why? Because they're trying to position themselves above you. Not in reality, but in perception. And perception is their battlefield. But here's the truth. You don't need to win that game. Because the moment you stop reacting, you step outside of it. You let them talk. You let them control the surface, while you observe the pattern underneath. And that's where real power is. Because while they're trying to control the moment, you're understanding the person. And once you understand the person, you don't need to compete. You've already seen enough. If you're starting to notice these patterns in people around you, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I see clearly. And stay with me till the end. Because you need all 8 points to be truly smart. Now here's the final layer most people miss. People who try to control the frame struggle when they lose it. The moment you don't react. The moment you don't engage emotionally. The moment you stay calm and grounded. They become unsettled. Because their control depends on your reaction. And when you don't give it, the illusion breaks. That's when you see the real them. The impatience. The frustration. The subtle shift in tone. And that shift? That's truth leaking through. So next time you're in a conversation, don't focus on the words. Watch who's steering. Watch who's interrupting. Watch who needs to stay in control. Because in that moment, you're not just listening anymore. You're reading power, insecurity, and intention at the same time. 4. Watch their energies shift around status. If you really want to understand someone, don't listen to how they speak to you. Watch how they change depending on who's in the room. Because nothing reveals a person faster than status. Not money. Not words. Not appearances. Status. The moment someone walks into a room, everything shifts. And most people don't even realize they're doing it. But you will. Because now, you're watching. Watch how someone behaves around. Someone they admire. Someone they fear. Someone they think is below them. And you'll see 3 different versions of the same person. That's not personality. That's strategy. Seneca said. Associate with people who are likely to improve you. But many people don't associate. They adjust. They become louder around people they want to impress. More polite around people they fear. More dismissive around people they don't value. And in that shift, their true character is exposed. Because real character is consistent. It doesn't rise for status. And drop for others. Marcus Aurelius said, "The true worth of a man is measured by the objects he pursues." And you can see those pursuits in how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Watch this carefully. When someone speaks to a waiter, a stranger, a person with no influence, do they show respect? Or do they change tone? Because respect that depends on status is not respect. It's calculation. And calculation is always strategic. Now here's where it gets deeper. Some people don't just change behavior. They change identity. Their voice shifts. Their posture changes. Their confidence rises or drops. All depending on who they're around. That's not awareness. That's instability. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." People who are grounded don't switch masks. They remain steady. But people who depend on external validation constantly adjust. Because they're not anchored internally. They're reacting externally. Now understand this clearly. The way someone treats lower status individuals is the most honest version of them. No performance. No benefit. No need to impress. Just behavior. And behavior without incentive is truth. Seneca said, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." But many people don't choose kindness unless there's something to gain. And that tells you everything. Now here's what most people get wrong. They judge people based on how they are treated. But that's incomplete. Because people treat you based on how they see you, not who they are. So instead, watch how they treat those they don't need. That's where character lives. That's where truth shows up without effort. And once you see that, you stop being impressed by surface behavior. Because you've seen the pattern underneath. Now here's the final layer. People who change based on status are predictable. They follow hierarchy. They respond to power. They adjust to advantage. And once you understand that, you understand them. Because their behavior is not random. It's calculated. So next time you're around people, don't just focus on how they treat you. Watch the room. Watch the shifts. Watch the subtle changes in tone, posture, and respect. Because in those shifts, you're seeing their values. And values never lie. 5. Catch the delay between reaction and response. There's a fraction of a second, so small, most people miss it completely, but inside that moment, the truth is exposed. It's not in what people say. It's not even in how they say it. It's in the gap. The space between what they feel and what they choose to show you. Because every human being experiences emotion first and control second. That means before someone speaks, before they compose their face, before they adjust their tone, there is a raw reaction. Unfiltered, uncontrolled, real. And that reaction is the most honest version of them. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." But here's what most people don't realize. That power takes time. It's not instant. So in that brief delay, before control kicks in, truth slips through. Watch closely. You say something unexpected. Maybe you challenge them. Maybe you mention a name. Maybe you bring up a sensitive topic. And for just a split second, their face changes. A flicker of irritation. A flash of discomfort. A hint of surprise. Then immediately, they recover. They smile. They respond calmly. They act like nothing happened. But something did happen. And if you caught it, you just saw the truth. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And in that moment, you see who is not in control. Because controlled people respond. Uncontrolled people react. And reactions always come first. Now here's where it becomes powerful. Most people only see the response. They hear the words. They believe the tone. They accept the final version presented to them. But you train yourself to catch the first version. The version before the mask. Because that's where alignment, or misalignment, lives. Now understand this deeply. The bigger the emotional reaction, the harder it is to hide. So when someone has a strong internal response, that delay becomes more visible. They pause longer. They hesitate. They struggle to maintain composure. And that struggle is information. Seneca said, "Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it." Because emotions want to move fast. But control tries to slow them down. And in that conflict, you see the person. Here's a simple example. You compliment someone. If it's genuine and they're secure, they accept it smoothly. But if they're insecure, there's a delay. They deflect. They downplay. They react awkwardly before responding. That delay? That's insecurity revealing itself. Now flip it. You challenge someone. If they're grounded, they stay calm. But if they're defensive, there's a flash. A quick tightening of the face. A sharp inhale. A slight shift in posture. Then comes the response. But by then, you've already seen what's real. Marcus Aurelius said, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Because calm eliminates the gap. The more self-control someone has, the smaller the delay. The less self-control, the more visible the reaction. Now here's the skill. You must slow yourself down to catch what happens quickly. Because if you're rushing, if you're reacting, if you're caught in the conversation, you'll miss it. But if you're present, fully aware, observing without judgment, that moment becomes clear. And once you start seeing it, you'll realize something powerful. People reveal their truth, before they speak it. So next time you're in a conversation, don't just listen for words. Watch the moment before the words. Watch the eyes. Watch the face. Watch the pause. Because in that tiny gap, you're not just hearing them anymore. You're seeing who they really are. 6. Notice what they avoid, not just what they say. Most people focus on what is said, but the real truth, it's hidden in what is never mentioned. Because people don't just communicate with words. They communicate with absence. With silence around certain topics. With hesitation around certain questions. With redirection when something gets too close. And that absence is not random. It's intentional. Because what people avoid usually holds the truth they don't want to face. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." But most people don't face what's in their power. They avoid it. And avoidance always leaves clues. Watch this carefully. You ask a simple question. Instead of answering directly, they shift. They give a partial answer. They change the topic. They respond with something related, but not exact. That's not confusion. That's deflection. Because when something is comfortable, people move toward it. But when something is uncomfortable, they move away from it. And that movement is visible. Seneca said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And avoidance is often driven by that imagined discomfort. Fear of exposure. Fear of judgment. Fear of consequences. So instead of confronting truth, they dance around it. Now here's where your awareness becomes sharp. Stop chasing direct answers. Start noticing patterns of avoidance. Ask yourself, what topics do they consistently skip? What questions do they never fully answer? Where does their energy shift when something comes up? Because those patterns point directly to truth. Now understand this. Avoidance is not always about lying. Sometimes, it's about pain, unresolved experiences, hidden insecurities, things they haven't processed yet. And when those areas are touched, they retreat. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And what people avoid is often what occupies their mind the most. Because what is unresolved doesn't disappear. It hides. And when it hides, it shows up indirectly. Through deflection. Through discomfort. Through silence. Now here's a powerful observation. People will talk endlessly about what they are proud of. But they will avoid what they are unsure about. And that contrast reveals their internal world. If someone constantly talks about success, but avoids specifics, there's something there. If someone avoids certain names, certain situations, certain timelines, that's not coincidence. That's direction. Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it." Because people who are aligned don't need to hide parts of their story. They are open. They are consistent. They are clear. But people who are conflicted edit themselves. They remove pieces. They adjust narratives. They avoid certain paths in conversation. And those missing pieces are louder than words. Now here's the deeper truth. What someone avoids telling you is often more important than what they choose to share. Because sharing is controlled. But avoidance? Avoidance leaks. Through hesitation. Through tone shifts. Through sudden topic changes. And once you start noticing that, you stop being distracted by words. Because words can be shaped. But patterns are hard to hide. Seneca said, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." And honesty is part of that honor. But when honesty is missing, avoidance fills the space. So next time you're talking to someone, don't just listen to what they say. Watch what they skip. Watch what they redirect. Watch what they never fully address. Because in those gaps, in those quiet absences, you're not just hearing a conversation. You're uncovering the truth beneath it. 7. Listen to what they say about others. Want to see who someone truly is? Listen to how they speak about people who aren't in the room. Because when people talk about others, they reveal much more than the stories themselves. They reveal their values, their insecurities, their character. Most people focus on what they're saying about the person they're describing. But the real insight lies in why they say it, and how they say it. If someone constantly complains about others, criticizes, or gossips, that is not just casual chatter. It's a mirror of their own mind, a reflection of their own fears, a blueprint of their insecurities. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you, and people who tear others down. They reveal the environment they cultivate for themselves. They show the type of energy they attract. They show what they fear, what they envy, and what they despise." Now notice this. Are they embellishing stories to make themselves look superior? Are they exaggerating faults of others to cover their own flaws? Do they always find someone to blame for situations beyond their control? Because these patterns are louder than words about themselves. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And the truth? Those who constantly speak ill of others rarely embody what they preach. Their words are shields, not reflections of virtue. Their judgment is a smoke screen for insecurity. But here's where the skill becomes power. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to call them out. You just observe. Observe tone. Observe choice of words. Observe the timing and energy behind every critique. Because once you do, you see their internal landscape with clarity. Now here's a deeper layer most people miss. The energy someone projects about others reveals how they will eventually treat you. If they gossip behind others' backs, you can expect them to discuss you when you're not around. If they exaggerate stories to elevate themselves, you can anticipate manipulation. If they constantly complain, you know they will drain energy rather than contribute. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." And listening here is active. It's analytical. It's seeing patterns in behavior rather than words. Here's the technique that makes this point scroll stopping. When someone talks about others, observe who they select to discuss. Observe what attributes they highlight. Observe how their own emotions leak through the story. Because in these moments, they cannot hide who they are. If you're noticing this pattern in people around you, hit like, subscribe, and comment below. I see the truth. Stay with me till the end. Because the final point, point 8, is the one that will completely change how you read people forever. And here's the last insight about talking about others. Some people will praise endlessly. Some people will critique endlessly. And the extremes are both revealing. Praise without substance often masks envy. Critique without context often masks fear. Observe both. Notice both. Understand both. Because people who are grounded speak truthfully, without embellishment, without manipulation, without hidden agendas. And once you've observed enough, you can predict behavior before it happens. You can see intentions before they manifest. You can navigate the world quietly, with clarity. 8. Watch for the subtle shift when power or advantage appears. Now comes the point most people completely overlook, but it's the one that separates the average observer from the master of human behavior. It's subtle. It's quiet. And if you're not paying attention, you'll never notice it. It's how people behave when opportunity, advantage, or power presents itself. Because humans are rarely consistent when the stakes are involved. Status, gain, influence, these act as accelerants. The way someone shifts in these moments reveals their true character. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, and thoughts become actions. Actions become habits, Habits reveal the man. Notice how someone behaves when they stand to gain something. Do they become generous? Do they become opportunistic? Do they maintain integrity? Because integrity under pressure is the ultimate test. Seneca said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." And here's what most people miss. It's not the gain itself. It's the behavioral shift that occurs in the presence of gain or advantage. Watch closely. Do they suddenly change tone or demeanor when influential people enter? Do they adjust their stories to align with those who have power? Do they sacrifice principles for personal benefit? Because these shifts are invisible to most people, but visible to the observant. Now here's where mastery begins. You don't need to have power to notice these shifts. You just need awareness. You just need patience. You just need discipline. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And the same principle applies to others. It's not just what happens to them. It's how they react when advantage or opportunity appears. The subtle flash of excitement. The micro-expression of calculation. The barely noticeable posture change. All of these reveal intention. Because people are rarely honest when reward is in play. Their focus shifts to themselves. Their morality shifts to convenience. Their transparency shifts to strategy. And the master observer sees all of it. Once you notice this pattern, you stop being surprised. You see manipulation before it happens. You sense deception before it's expressed. You understand motives without being told. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look well into thyself. There is a source of strength which will always rise to meet you." And by observing others in these subtle moments, you're tapping into your own source of power. Because knowledge of truth is freedom. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from deception. Freedom from being blindsided. Here's the final layer. The more you observe, the more patterns emerge. Some people chase advantage. Some people conceal advantage. Some people pretend advantage doesn't exist. And in each pattern, their true self is revealed. So next time you're in a meeting, or a conversation, or a social gathering, watch the shift. Watch the subtle body language. Watch the energy before, during, and after opportunity presents itself. Because in that shift, you're not just seeing people. You're reading the story of who they really are. And once you see that clearly, you never need to guess again. You move with certainty. You act with precision. You observe, and you understand. Because mastery is not about power over others. It's power over perception. It's clarity in chaos. It's seeing truth before truth is spoken. Congratulations, you've made it through all 8 points. And now, the truth becomes undeniable. People are revealing themselves in ways most never notice. Every twitch, hesitation, shift, and word they avoid, it all tells a story. From micro-expressions to frame control, from what they avoid to how they act around status or power, you've seen the invisible patterns that separate ordinary observers from masters of human behavior. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Every thought, every hidden motive, every subtle reaction you've learned to catch is a window into that soul. And once you see it, nothing about human behavior is ever a mystery again. Seneca reminded us, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." Now you can see clearly who elevates you, who drains you, and who manipulates the room. You don't have to guess. You don't have to take anyone at face value. You observe. You understand. You act with calm certainty. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." The same principle applies to reading people. It's not that others hide their truth. It's that you choose whether to notice it or stay blind. And now you're awake? Here's the final truth. Mastery of perception is freedom. Freedom from deception. Freedom from manipulation. Freedom from wasted time and energy. You move faster. Smarter. Calmer. And people sense it, even if they can't see it. So here's what you do next. Like this video if you're ready to see what most people can't. Subscribe to master the Stoic mindset and sharpen your perception every day. Comment below. I see clearly. If you're committed to applying all 8 points and reading people like an open book. Because knowledge without action is wasted. Observation without application is meaningless. But if you take what you've learned today, you will never see the world the same way again. You will never be manipulated the same way again. You will move with quiet power and clarity that others will feel but cannot touch. Now go. Watch, observe, and see what others are hiding. Your mastery begins here.